Good morning, gentlemen. We are holding on the 107th segment of the Think Before You Speak series, Laws of Shemirat Halashon with Clarity. Lilu Nishmat, the great Chafetz Chaim, Zechet Tzadik Lebracha. Lilu Nishmat, Reb Chaim Kanievsky, Zechet Tzadik Lebracha. Lilu Nishmat, Yedidi Nafshi, Reb Zechariah Wallerstein, Zechet Tzadik Lebracha. Lilu Nishmat, Luz Aliza Bat Henriette and her children that passed with her in the fire. Ruach Hashem Tenichena Began Eden. These words today should be a tremendous refuah shlema for Chaya, Esther, Bat Barbara. These words should be a tremendous siyata dishmaya for our guys, our chabur that sits and learn every morning. They should be zoiche, beracha v'atzlacha, shmira min hashamayim, siyata dishmaya. These halachot are specifically dedicated for the shmira ma'alya, and the siyata dishmaya, and the yeshua gdola of Chaim Davido ben Chayesara. Today's halachot, titled Insubstantial Faults. I know that's a big word, but let's try that. Insubstantial faults. And we'll explain what that means in a moment. Faults that are not of substance. So now what are we talking about? Yesterday we started this idea. We were talking about partnerships, and we were also talking about life partnerships, shidduchim. So now here I want to give you a very typical story, an example. And from here, I think we'll build out a great halacha. So this guy comes home from yeshiva, and he's approached by a neighbor. And he says, hey, a friend of yours from your yeshiva was just brought to go out with my daughter. And I'm wondering, could you tell me some information about the guy? Now, step number one, before I go into the halacha, here is a rule of thumb. When someone asks you for information about a person in general, you turn around and you say to them, what specifics do you want to hear about? You don't start giving a general off-chart resume, because it can very well lead you into areas that you should not go, halachically. So always, rule of thumb, if anybody asks you information about anybody, for shidduchim, for partnership, whatever, what is it that you want to know about? And let them start asking you specific pointed questions, and you give them specific pointed answers as long as it's halachically okay. Okay, back to our story. So now, the neighbor walks up to you, you're back from yeshiva, and he says, hey, I know you have a friend in yeshiva, the name was just brought to my daughter to date, to go out. Tell me about the guy. And you turn around and you say to him, what exactly is it that you want to know? He says, I want to know about midot. You tell him the guy has great midot. You tell him that he's a great matmid. You tell him that he is clearly one of the better guys in yeshiva, very bright future. And as you're talking and explaining to him all the detail of the things he wants to know, when he asks you about the general picture of the family, you stop. And you remember to yourself, 1 second, this guy's father doesn't really learn. Matter of fact, he doesn't even really pray. His father doesn't even go to shul. His father is not as religious as the son. Am I allowed to reveal that when asked on the shidduch of this guy? The guy's a gem. The guy's a gem. The guy is a matmid. He's a future budding great success story in Torah. And yet, do I say anything about the father? And he thinks back to his yeshiva learning, and he remembers the Chafetz Chaim's book, Shemirat Halashon, the book of Chafetz Chaim, Sefer Chafetz Chaim. And he says, no, that's not a substantial fault that has to do with the boy they're looking into. And therefore, he holds back and does not say a word about the boy's father. And that's the halacha. The halacha is that when people are asking you to give information about someone, and they're looking and digging to see if there are any faults, like in the way of a shidduch, all insubstantial faults are held off to the side. And under this topic, I want to say something. It's interesting what people call faults. Sometimes people think that a guy is overly innocent. I heard that a few times. Now, to one person, what he might call a fault is to another person maybe a ma'ala. Some people like when there's a boy that wasn't so street smart, Not everything on the street you want to bring home. So to one guy is a fault, might be to another guy a compliment. And therefore, be very careful. When some people consider something a fault, leave it alone. Just talk about the good of the boy and tell him what it is that should be told. At the same time, when it comes to family, remember, we don't bring out insubstantial family faults. If there's a family fault that's substantial, like the parents are not Shomer Shabbat, the parents are actively against the religious life that their children are living, and they're looking to make trouble for them, that's something else. That you might have to say if it's going to hurt the marriage or ruin the marriage. I'm talking about insubstantial family faults, like you want to bring up family history of embarrassing things that happened to this family in the past. There's no room for that when it comes to giving information about a shidduch of a guy. You talk about his good and you leave the father and mother out of it. At the end of the day, don't forget, Abraham Avinu, his father was Terach. Thank you for listening.